Good evening, welcome back. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, along with me, my own Dana Scully. Tim Dennis is here this evening. And Tim, it is very rare that when I bring up a topic to you, you get all fired up.
Oh, well,
I love when you get excited about one of the topics we're going to talk about. When I brought to you the fact that we're going to kind of talk about this flat earth clues, these flat earth theory. Mm-hmm. I know your eyebrow immediately popped up and, well, you know, and started telling me something which I thought was hilarious, is that some rapper named B.O.B. was going after, I always butcher his name, is it Neil?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was funny that a world-renowned scientist is crossing swords with a rapper.
Well, technically the way it happened was B.O.B. he throws out conspiracy theories every once in a while on his Twitter. He was working on cloning before he got to the flat earth theory.
I love that the rapper was working on cloning.
Well, he was throwing out different things about cloning, and then he got to the flat Earth theory. At which point, Neil deGrasse Tyson said, "Whoa, wait a minute," and they got into it back and forth over a picture that B.O.B. had posted that showed the horizon of, I think it was New York City, 16 miles away, and he was wondering why he could see clear into New York City. I think it was New York City. Don't quote me on that, but and we'll get into it a little bit later. But it was an interesting Twitter battle back and forth between the two, in which Neil deGrasse Tyson did his version of a mic drop on The Daily Show, where he came up with a rap with his son to basically battle rap B.O.B. about flat Earth versus round Earth.
He battle rapped. Oh, yeah, that's good. Well, so that just because he got the last word, you feel like that was the.
I think he made some pretty good points.
All right. Yeah. Well, joining us this evening, Mark Sargent is our guest. He asks the question, are we inside a Truman Show, an enclosed world thousands of miles wide? He has a series of videos that show it's not only a possibility, but most likely is the reality of our world. He grew up on South Whidbey Island, Washington. Mark Sargent started his career playing computer games professionally in Boulder, Colorado. From there, he spent the next 20 years training people in proprietary software. In 2014, he looked into what is no doubt the most ridiculous conspiracy ever, called the Flat Earth Theory, and through extensive research discovered that maybe it wasn't so laughable after all. We're going to spend the next couple hours discussing this. In early 2015, he released a series of YouTube videos entitled Flat Earth Clues, which delves into the possibility of our human civilization actually being inside a Truman Show-like enclosed system, and how it's been hidden from the public since 1956. Joining us right now, Mark Sargent. Good evening, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
How high are you?
Physically or altitude-wise?
This theory, like you said, it sounds too crazy. This has got to be the dumbest theory ever heard, but then you start looking into it and finding out that maybe it's not so dumb. How is that a paradigm shift for you?
Well, that's the weird thing because, I was a conspiracy guy and, I was into just about every conspiracy there was, and everybody's heard about this. We could say enclosed world or enclosed system or Truman Show, and that doesn't really get anybody's ire up. But the second you say flat Earth, everyone goes, oh, that piece of junk. Nobody wants to look at that. And so I started out in 2014 like everybody. Nobody goes into the flat. I mean, yeah, you get a few people, but they're crazy. A few, most of the people that go into flat Earth go into it trying to debunk it because It's like, okay, there's no way this could be true. We all know the Earth is round. We all know it's a sphere. So I'm just going to prove it and then put this thing to bed. And I started in the middle of summer in 2014, and 9 months later, in February of 2015, I basically gave up. I had that weird Jerry Maguire moment where I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, I can't actually prove it's a globe. In fact, there's so little evidence on the globe side compared to, because we're trying to, the flat Earth movement's really like doing a court case, and that is putting reasonable doubt, on the globe side. And that's where we ended up, where I woke up and I said, okay, I'm just going to make the clues, boom, 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 boom. And I really thought, honestly, I thought I'd get an astronomer or an astrophysicist or someone that would come and say, okay, here's why it's a globe. Here's 100% proof, or here's the visual evidence. That's what everyone really wants. You can shut up now and you can stop making videos. And here we are coming up. In fact, on the 10th of this month will be the 1-year anniversary of the clues. And it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And I've almost lost count of how many interviews I've done at this point.
Well, so. You're challenging the ideas and beliefs that we've all held true. And I think what's interesting is, I want to start at the beginning because one of your first videos really kind of goes through these different points and how we got to the belief system we started with the flat Earth theory. Then we changed it into this rounded Earth theory. So, and I thought it was interesting, the science or the historical reference that you brought into how we started to believe it, why we started to believe it, and why we should question that belief system. But why did you even start looking at this fringe theory to begin with?
I started looking at it because there was a video. I like mystery. You know, human beings love mysteries,
right.
and we're very curious. And so when I saw a little video by a German guy that was talking about flights in the southern hemisphere, and that is everything below the equator, like if you're going from South America to Africa or Australia, and he goes, the flight routes are all wrong. They don't make sense. They're bouncing, they're connecting in places they shouldn't, and they don't make sense unless the Earth is flat. But that can't be possible. I go, okay, that's interesting. That's pretty good. But then I watched an interesting video by a guy named Matt Boylan, who claimed that when he was in his 20s, he worked for NASA. He was a painter, that drew stuff for artistic renderings of this and that. Nothing real sinister. And he was told at some high-level party out in the East Coast of the United States, he was Canadian, by the way, that hired out of Montreal, but he was at a party where they said they told him basically that GPS doesn't work down in Antarctica because there's no GPS coverage in Antarctica because the world is flat, and he didn't even get it back then. It was kind of like a coming out thing for him, where it was like, okay, you in with us or not with us? And he didn't get it. He absolutely didn't absorb, like most people. And then I go, okay, that's a good story. That's a good story. It's a good science fiction story, movie of the week type thing. But I certainly should be able to disprove it. And so that's when I started digging into the research. I looked at the Flat Earth Society. I joined that. Believe it or not, there is a Flat Earth Society. There's several now, but the one I joined is closed down. They closed down shortly in 2015 for whatever reason. I don't know. And just started looking into everything from I focused a lot on NASA, looked at a lot of, where are the pictures, where are the videos, and then looked at Antarctica, looked at Admiral Byrd. And I know I'm kind of glossing it over, but we'll get into it more. But the more I looked into it, basically what I was trying to do was I was going, okay, it's obvious the globe model has mountains and mountains of evidence. Therefore, all I have to do is pick one box of this mountain of evidence and should be able to disprove, make the flat Earth look ridiculous. And I kept going through box after box, and they were just empty. It was just packing popcorn. There was nothing in it. All the proof that they said that we had for years and years wasn't there. And so then I backtracked and said, okay, when did we know? When were we told it was a globe? Because we're all told this. Nobody knows it. It's something you're told. It's not like gravity or fire burns or water is wet or anything like that. This is something you're told. You don't know this. It's just something you're shown in a textbook. And so the math was shown. The math was introduced 500 years ago. After the first 4,000 years of our civilization, every tribe, every culture, every civilization, at one point or another, every religion thought it was flat. It was covered with a big canopy, and there's all sorts of wonder. Going back to Genesis, you want to pick something. And they introduced the model back 500 years ago, but there was no way to absolutely prove it. I mean, the math was there, but until you got high enough to take a picture of the Earth, what did you really know? And so balloon travel didn't even happen until 1760, where you actually put people up in a balloon. The internal combustion engine wasn't until 1900. The planes shortly after that, and then rocket technology didn't even wasn't able to go up to any high atmosphere levels at all until the 1950s. And so then it sort of happened. And again, I'll put the premise out there, and that is, let's say the rocket technology, let's say the United States or Russia put a rocket up.
Well, if I could take you back, you mentioned in the video, too, Copernicus's idea and theory with mathematics that we must be a round planet. We can't possibly be flat.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain that to the listeners? Because I think that plays an important part, that we're going on the word of a man who had no way to see from a bird's eye view. He was using math, which technically should work, but we've seen in history and in science, math doesn't always add up.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can use math to do just about anything. And yeah, in fact, the leap of faith that was put in there back in the 1500s was amazing. And that was, instead of a relatively simple flat world enclosed in some sort of dome-like structure, he said, well, if the Earth, if it's a globe and it's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and that globe is also spinning around the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, and so on, then it works. And it's a huge leap of faith. And in fact, he didn't even publish his work until he died. He was one of his things in his will. It's like, okay, publish my thing on what's going on until several years after I'm gone. And it seemed to resonate with the new wave of science that was coming out. And religion kind of went along with it, the big five religious houses. And they kind of went along with it because, well, it's a small change, and there really isn't that much it's going to conflict with any of the holy books. Therefore, let's just go with it. And the science really kept expanding from there because it really opens up the universe when you say it's a sphere. Then you can talk about other planets and the galaxy and then the universe and how stars are formed, and you can really open things up. And so, yeah, that's what they went with. And for 500 years, up until now, that's 20-something generations, people went with that. And that's what we were told. And again, you put the globe in the classroom when, you're 6 years old, first grade, everybody knows this. And again, that's the question I put out to people. I said, tell me how you know it's a globe. Tell me when you first figured out it was a globe. Did you know just because there was a model in your classroom when you were 6 years old? Or do you know because you saw the exactly one picture that was taken that NASA showed you from 1972 up until summer of last year? And that's what, and no matter who I asked, it's always those two answers.
All right. Well, we have to take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue with Mark Sargent and the Flat World Theory here on Darkness Radio. Good evening. Welcome back to Darkness Radio, the Flat Earth Theory. That's what we're discussing this evening with Mark Sargent, our guest. Mark, since we began walking, our whole goal as humans, it seems, is to explore and reach past what we know. They have traveled and traversed the world and the oceans. And if it's a flat Earth and there is this kind of dome over us, why has none of the great voyagers, travelers bumped into the glass side of the dome? I mean, it would seem that at some point we would hit that edge and we would be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are more of a saucer than we are an egg.
Yeah, excellent point. And actually, there's one explorer that did exactly that. I put forth a theory, in the clues that I think some of the old maps survived, and by that I mean, I fully believe there were civilizations that lived before ours. Check out the ancient, the sunken cities and outside in the oceans of Japan or India, or how old really are the pyramids. But the point is I think some of the old maps survived, showing what this Earth really was, the actual maps of this world. But it comes down to the technology of the civilization, meaning if you don't have a decent technology, how are you going to do it? For example, if you tell let's say the King of France in 1400 what the Earth really looks like, what are you going to do with that? I mean, you got wooden ships, you got the horse. That's basically it. Until the internal combustion engine came out in the early 1900s, you didn't have the ability to really do any, explore for any length of time. So when it came to what you're saying, explorers, going around the world, there seemed to be, and I've got to describe this because people don't understand what I'm saying here. Because if the Earth is flat, well, then what's at the edge? Because that's the first thing. Lots of people, the old ancient saying of that is, well, aren't you going to fall off the edge? And no, you're not going to fall off the edge because eventually you're going to run into Antarctica. And then people have to kind of work the 3D out in their head, and they're going, wait, Antarctica is a continent. What do you mean they're going to run Antarctica? And I'm saying no. On a flat Earth map, Antarctica is actually stretched all the way around us. It is just a frozen landmass. If you want to call it an ice ring, that's one thing, but it's really the Antarctic shoreline that's really surrounds us. And that was the last great undiscovered thing. So there was a guy, very, very interesting character in this, and I just happened to stumble upon it, and that is Admiral Richard E. Byrd, America's greatest explorer of all time, youngest admiral in the United States Navy. He made admiral at age 41. And most people know him for the Hollow Earth legend, that he apparently found something in a rickety plane in 1926 when he was doing the North Pole expedition. He not only was an explorer, but he flew all his own stuff. He was a great pilot. And then for whatever reason, from 1926 all the way up until his death in 1957, he spent the rest of his life down in Antarctica looking for something. And I think the ancient societies, or the power elite of this world, knew full well what they were looking for, and so they sent him to find it, because he just kept going back to Antarctica, mission after mission, year after year, for almost 30 years. And he goes on television, and you can look this up online. It's also in the clues, but you can find the raw interview if you want. He goes on television, CBS, as a matter of fact, in 1954. And starts talking about Antarctica in a show called the Long Jeans Chronoscope, which is kind of like our equivalent of like 60 Minutes. And he starts talking about how Antarctica is made out of money, that it's rich in resources. It's got a mountain range made out of coal, there's oil, there's minerals, there's uranium, and all these countries are down there. The survivors of World War II, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and they're all down there looking to make money. And he's getting ready for his next mission, which turned out to be his last, which is Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 to 1956. And he goes down there, and all of a sudden the tone changed. And that was all these countries that were going down there to make money, they all of a sudden changed their tune. And what I think he found was what you're talking about, the edge, the barrier, whatever, some physical sign that the world was not what we thought it was. Because everybody left the ice at the same time. And I mean every country that was down there, United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, Argentina, Chile, New Zealand, Australia, they all left as fast as they could. And they put in place of them leaving what's now known as the Antarctic Treaty, which they ratified officially in 1959. All the nations signed onto it, which says that any country, and if you started a brand new country tomorrow, I called it Davelandia, you would be, this piece of paper would be put in front of you that says, oh yeah, by the way, you can't go down to Antarctica with any corporation that you have, no matter how much money, ever. You can't go down there. And you're never going to be able to go down there. And in fact, this treaty isn't even up for review until 2041, which I'm sure they'll extend it to whatever. And now it's protected by a second treaty. And some people say, well, it's environmental concerns. And yeah, I would have said, yeah, maybe in the mid-70s or 80s that would have been the case. But this was 1959. And, Greenpeace wasn't even founded until 1971. There's no indigenous plant life, no animal life. There's no historical pieces as far as we know. There's no indigenous population. There's nothing down there. It's like, if you believe what the Globe people say, there's 13 million square miles of ice. And nobody's allowed to go down there. And that struck me as, one of those big telling points. That is, he doth protest too much. And that is, if you go so far out of your way to say that no corporation could go down there ever, you're really going out of your way to hide something. But then after that, some really telling things happened.
Could I ask one thing? Let me ask one thing, though, Mark. Just looking at it from an industrial point of view, even though Greenpeace and maybe the environmental aspects weren't as high then as they are today, couldn't it be said that we realize that by going and industrializing an area that's, as you said, 13 million miles of ice, we are going to melt that ice. We are then going to have an effect on the water flow around the world. We're going to have an effect on things, how it progresses, and that it's just not worth putting that type of ecological damage onto our planet, which could have repercussions felt around the world because of the amount of moisture that would be released or greenhouse effect that would come from it.
Maybe. I mean, that's not a bad idea. Actually, it's one of the first time I've heard that one. And it's not bad, but you know full well that the big players in this world. By that I mean the petroleum companies. They don't care, and that is they're looking to make money. And the fracking would be a perfect example. Look at the ecological havoc they've wrought with that. And that is, my point is that if they want to start fracking in your backyard tomorrow, they're going to be able to do it. Oh, yeah, you might be able to file an injunction and slow them down, maybe. but they can go anywhere they want. They've got the backstage pass to anything. They're getting into national parks, and those things have been protected for a long time. And yet these people, these corporations, not only can they not go down there, here's the other part that kind of threw me, which was they're not even allowed to talk about it. So let's say you're the head of Exxon, and you've got friends, I don't know, the Washington Post and the New York Times. How easy it would be for you to pay these guys to run a story every week saying why it's good for Exxon to be in Antarctica. You could run that and then pay your lobbyists and go into Congress and Senate and whoever else you have to grease and get this stuff done. They're not even allowed to consider that. So you know how that plays out. I mean, whoever the head of Exxon, I'm sure everybody's thought about it at some point or another. They think about it, and then they're approached by someone in the government, and they say, no, it's a matter of national security. You can't go down there.
Mark, what if I throw this monkey wrench into the idea as well? Just as long as we're talking conspiracy, we're talking probabilities, possibilities.
Sure.
This sounds very much like another exploration we made a number of times and then just stopped. It sounds like the exploration of the moon. We know how to get there. We can go there. We've been there. We've come back from there. And then all of a sudden, we have no interest in going back again. There's nothing in it. Yet we know that it's rich in certain minerals that we need here on our planet, but we don't go there. We don't cultivate it. We don't take care of it. There is some belief, and there's been some historical rhetoric that there is an alien culture that lives there, and we were allowed to see it so that we could answer our questions, and now we're not supposed to go back there. Could it be that in that culture in Antarctica they found those beings, and maybe that's their claim? Maybe that's where they belong, and we're not supposed to interfere with them.
That's a very interesting one, and I'm sure we'll dig into the moon thing later or whenever you want to get to it, because I know we probably have the second break coming up. But yeah, the Antarctic thing is very, very interesting in that regards, because several people have brought up part of that to me, which is the Operation High Jump, also led by Admiral Byrd in 1946, which was, there was lots of explorations going on in Antarctica, but during World War II, nobody was exploring Antarctica except for one group, and that was Nazi Germany. And nobody knows what they were doing down there. But shortly after the war, there was Operation High Jump. It was a full-blown military operation where they took a full carrier fleet of 5,000, 7,000 men or something like that down to Antarctica to do something. A military organization. Now, if the only ones that were down there beforehand was Nazi Germany, did they set up a base? Were they in contact with some sort of alien group? Very, very possible. But whatever they did down there, they seem to take care of. Because people say, I keep getting people saying, it's Operation High Jump. But by 1954, it wasn't even an afterthought. Admiral Byrd, it wasn't even brought up to him. He didn't seem concerned about it at that point. That was only 8 years later. 8 years later, they were just talking about making money. So, yeah, it's possible that there's something down there. It's a combination of things. It could be that not only is there a barrier down there, but maybe there's a civilization that lives next to the barrier, or, a small contingency that doesn't want us down there.
We have to take a break. Mark Sargent, our guest, will come back with more of the Flat Earth Theory right after this. Welcome back to the show. We will have a link up to Mark's website and his research. You can find it on our site under darknessradio.com. Go to the guest section, and it'll be located there. You can go to his website, check out the videos for yourself, do the research, and investigate this claim. Let me start back with something, Mark. Okay, there are a lot of claims that we have to protect certain things. Even our guest in the last hour, maybe we don't talk about, maybe the government doesn't admit that Bigfoot exists because it flies in the face of what we believe in the Bible. Yep. And we don't talk about aliens because then it makes people question our position in the world, and why doesn't God mention aliens in the Bible? Why isn't this there? Now, walk with me through this task. Mm-hmm. When we began the world, we believed it was flat, and we were fine with it, and it was okay that God made the world flat. And then Copernicus came along and used math and said, no, we're probably roundish. And we became okay with that. If we were to revert back to, no, the world is flat, and we understand that, why hide it? We lived for thousands of years believing it, and we're fine. We've lived hundreds of years looking at the second theory, and we're fine. So obviously we're an adjustable species. We can go back to believing things that we once believed at one point and didn't seem to fly in the face of God. I don't know that it says anywhere in the Bible, and on the fourth day, God shaped it into a marble. There's no reference to the shape of our world, just that it here and it exists.
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Why indeed? Well, you're right. We are adaptable, and we would adapt here as well. The big thing, though, that has changed between then and now, between thousands of years ago and now, is something obvious and we use every day, and that's science. And that was once it became a globe, then a group which really, honestly, started out as their own religion, started creating theories that were outside of holy text. And really, they ran with it. And so they started to develop everything that was developed outside of that. There was no biblical reference to. And so science became not only, and plus all these things that science was creating was benefiting mankind. So yeah, in fact, I talked about this recently on something where I said, look, yeah, we've created, science has created wonderful things like the light bulb and air conditioning and smartphones, for better or worse. But at the same time, most of science's developments have been in the military side of things, how better to advance a military force and weapons.
But if we look at that fact, okay, that, but we've made these new advancements in science believing this. Well, we've also made medicines that we now know are killing people. We've developed all these different things. And again, as long as we're showing that we're adapting, we're trying to learn. I mean, okay, big oil controls this, big pharma controls that. Are we up against big Rand McNally, the globe makers? And we don't want to ruin the globe business by now doing it as flat. It just seems like that is the one thing the government shouldn't have to hide. Because it doesn't matter. What does it matter whether we're round or flat?
And that's a great point, because I get that asked probably one out of every 10 emails, and that is, why does it matter? Does it really matter if it's round or flat? And I go, well, it doesn't matter until the day that everybody knows it at once. And by that I mean this. Do you have to get up and go to your crappy job in the morning? Absolutely you do. Yeah, but that all may change very, very quickly, and the big reason is because the big five religions of this world, and by that I mean Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they control. There's about 80% of the population that deals with that. What if all of a sudden all these groups, the massive core of humanity, all of a sudden we're told, oh yeah, by the way, intelligent design is real, and over there, if you walk far enough, you can actually see the handprint of God. Oh, and the government's been hiding it from you. And by that I mean science, because these science organizations did not want to, they'd be shooting themselves in the foot, or or in this case, shotgunning themselves in the leg, because science would have to be, would be overturned. Imagine astrophysics and astronomy departments in every university in every country. They would be shut down, and then the remaining physical sciences, geology, hydrology, archaeology, even biology, they would have to be retooled to this new model. The upheaval, not to mention the largest class action lawsuit of all time, which would be every major military subcontractor against each other and NASA. The stock market would be hit for quite. Let's put it this way: it would be from the authority standpoint, the powers that be, it would be a soup sandwich, and it would last for quite some time. And again, and religion, don't think, religion's supposed to be peaceful and do unto others, that sort of thing. But they're going to come back and say, whoa, you've been beating us up about evolution and intelligent design and all this for hundreds of years, and you were wrong. There actually is a creator, and this place was built. There's going to be some resentment there.
Mark, the one thing we do know about people is we want to be led. It's an honest fact. Psychologists will tell you that children crave structure. They want to be punished and told what to do and realize that there are rules and laws. I think it's all in the way the government handles things. If the government came to them and said, listen, we thought we had a handle on this, we thought we understood it, and we wanted to explore it and make sure that we understood the entire dynamic before we sent people off into some crazy tizzy. So now we have the science. Now we can explain to you what we've seen, what we now know and understand. So, there's the famous statement, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Science is known. We can't sometimes progress science unless we do some horrific things like experimentation on humans and animals and plant life. So the idea, I don't think, is so far removed that people, if we couched it in the way of, we did this as daddy and mommy to protect you, And now that we can understand it, we can explain it to you so that it makes sense for everybody. This is what we want to do. I don't see that there would be this mass panic, and maybe I'm just too utopian in nature to think that.
No. You know what? You put it about as eloquent as anybody, and that is it could go either way. Which is, you're right. If the government did it right, if they did, the whole mommy and daddy thing. If Neil deGrasse Tyson fell on the sword, which really would go a long way for this, and that is, if he literally, honestly, if he just came out, in fact, I thought about this many times. It's like he comes out on national television and said, "Look, I'm sorry." 2 words. And it's like, look, we did this for your own good. I'm a huge believer in the greater good. I look at just about every conspiracy and I say, I totally understand the other side's point of view. And in this case, I understand it. If you look at it and say, okay, we don't think the public's ready for this yet. How long can we hold on to it? And then you think, okay, well, as long as the detection technology doesn't keep up, and it turns out that's about 60 years in our case, and then you release it to them. Could you do it in a way that the population, you would get minimal collateral damage or minimal blowback?
Well,
yes.
And
yes,
you've mentioned the fact that most of what we do on this planet is financially based. If we suddenly release this information and all of these changes needed to take place and we had to implement this science, we had to implement the new ideas, whereas you see it a complete deconstruction of what we have, I see it as the next evolution, and there would be a whole new influx of money being poured into these sciences and into the understanding and into travel industry, people wanting to go see the edge or having this accent. I think financially it would make more sense to own up to changes than it would be to continually hide them and pretend that they don't exist. So I see a different version of the story that, and maybe I'm putting too much faith in a world that loves to watch Honey Boo Boo and the housewives of every major city, and they find that as entertainment. Maybe I'm giving them way too much credit. Boy, here comes the hate mail if they can figure out how to type.
You're absolutely right. You're dead on in that capacity. There's not just. In fact, I was joking about it. If I ever talk to anybody in the financial sector, because they come back and say, "Is there any money to be made here?" I'm going, "Is there any money? All the money can be made here. Trillions of dollars would be. Talk about a growth industry. Cities would move. The entire industries would be transforming. There'd be all this stuff going on. The job creation, the job transformation would be staggering. Again, if it was done right. But you're absolutely dead on. Yeah.
Well, again, then it just makes me wonder if some little radio show host in Minnesota can see this. Why can't the leaders of our world see that there's a positive spin? I mean, we have enough spin doctors, right? In the world. Why can't we utilize that? We have to take another break. When we come back, we'll continue with Mark Sargent. A fascinating story. I mean, it's intriguing. I love the idea of looking at things differently. But when we come back, all right, so if we buy the fact that the Earth is not round, if we're going to give into this theory and this belief system, what is the shape of the Earth? How do we know that this is the shape of the Earth? Because, again, if we've never gotten up high enough to prove that the Earth is round, have we gotten up high enough to prove the theory that there is an edge and a lip and a glass dome? And then the more important question, if that's true, who put it there? We'll talk about that and so much more right here on Darkness Radio. Ooh, Tim, I'm feeling all sciencey tonight.
Yeah.
I need this guy as my new best friend. You're going to have to move out, Tim. I want a guy that follows me and says, wow, that's great thinking, Dave. Wow, I've never heard that before, Dave. Why don't you do that more often, Tim?
Because sometimes you're wrong.
All right.
Yeah.
You got to go and throw logic back in my face. What a jerk.
Well,
all right. Mark Sargent, our guest this evening as we talk about the flat Earth theory. Mark, okay, if we buy into the possibility that the Earth is not egg-shaped or roundish, explain to us what exactly is the shape of the planet Earth.
If you want to take, all right. So the shape would be, let's do the ground level first, and that is, because how are the continents laid out? If you took a globe and you put your hand on the North Pole and you flattened it, and then kind of drew a circle and cut around a fairly round edge, and we're we're approximating here. That's how it would look. So the North Pole would be the actual center of the map, like the center of a dinner plate. The continents would be spread out kind of organically from the center, reaching towards the side, and then the outer edge would be just an icy white continent called Antarctica. And then it is covered by some sort of structure, some sort of dome-ish structure, similar to the Truman Show, talked about in Genesis and other things, stretched over like a canopy. But if you had to have a visual of it, it kind of looked like a sports stadium, where it doesn't have to reach up very far. Now, there's lots of, even the flat Earth community is divided on a lot of these points. Some people say, the dome is really high arcing like a snow globe. Others say it's shallow like a sports stadium. Others, even more oddly shaped like the edge. It goes out quite a ways from when you hit Antarctica until you finally run into the edge, which I kind of like. So it'd be kind of like if you took a $50 and put it on a table, and then took a glass salad bowl and put it on top of that. The $50 is fairly small inside that salad bowl, but the point is to show the distance between the edge of that $50 and the edge of the barrier itself. So that's what it looks like. And what's the dome made out of? You take your pick. A heavy element, a heavy water, some sort of harmonic frequency, a force field. We don't know, but it doesn't appear to be penetrable, which will, I don't know if you want me to get into the high altitude atomic testing. But that's kind of how I determined the shape of this thing,
if you talk about, we're going to put our hand on the top of the globe, press it down, the North Pole is the center. What are these things called pole shifts that science talks about, and that the North and the South Pole drift, and that we have to make adjustments for that? If that's a fact, how does that happen?
Magnetics. Yeah. The magnetics, when it comes, and again, it's such a... I know that anyone listening to this, your guys are probably glazing over because everyone rejects this the first time. And look, I'll be honest, anyone that's listening now, if you're not laughing at this or rolling your eyes, there's probably something wrong with you, because nobody gets this the first time around. It takes a little while to absorb, sometimes anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, in my case, a couple of months, because I was stubborn. So everything is mechanical, including the underwater conveyor systems that run the oceans, the jet stream that runs the air circulation up above, the magma systems down below. That's real controversial in my circles. And the magnetic poles, which, because what is magnetism? What is gravity? Which we'll get into whenever you want to get into it. But magnetism for me, when it comes to the magnetic north and south, those are magnetic forces that are underneath the surface, which we have not dug down very far, which we can get into later, whenever. That move. It's not necessarily a stationary thing. Of course, the compasses still have to point somewhere, so it's got to be an approximate of the North Pole, and then a very, very weak. So basically, the compasses when you're going around this dinner plate will always point towards the north, because the North Pole is much stronger magnetic force. When you get down to the South Pole, it's spread around the edge. It's a much weaker force, and exactly when the distance is when it flips over to the south, I'm not sure. But point is, the rotating magnetic thing is just a mechanical process underneath this. It's literally a moving magnet, for lack of a better term.
Where do we get the gravity then from? If the idea that Copernicus threw out was the way that we stay on our planet, we're not thrown out into the universe, is because of the way our planet rotates and then rotates around the universe.
Yep.
If we're not a spinning planet, what are we? Or are we a record on a turntable spinning?
Well, yeah. What is science? You can ask any scientist this. Gravity is a hard thing to explain now. And what is, because some say, well, it's density of mass, the attraction of mass and matter. It's like, well, that really hasn't changed if you're on a flat model. The only question is what's outside it and what's underneath it. So when it comes to gravity, how should I say this? I consider gravity on a flat model. It could be density underneath. We could be on this could be a flat model on a much bigger thing. Some people say it was a bigger planet. I'm just going, it doesn't have to be a planet. We could be sitting on top of a box. But for me, gravity, I treat it like we do in the simulation world, which is, it's really just a form of molecular magnetism, which is, what I mean by that is, everyone knows that if you take a magnet, you can magnetize metal things like a paperclip. But what if you had a magnet that could attract anything at a molecular level, like organics, everything from wood to water? If you had that underneath the surface, then, which is what we do in simulations, then what's the difference between what we perceive as that and what we're calling gravity now, which was what I'm calling gravity now?
Well, let me ask you this, Mark, because there's always mechanical failure in any machine, whether it be natural, man-made, whatever. Eventually, everything fails. If this machine were to fail, are you saying that the seas overrun everything, we end up floating up to the dome because we have no gravity? What keeps this thing running forever?
Well, I don't think it runs forever necessarily.
Mark, are the failures, are the system failures, earthquakes, tsunamis?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think that at all. I think the tsunamis and the earthquakes are all part of the natural process. But when it comes to the failure, I think this thing's so well designed, and any civilization is here for such a brief amount of time that the failures are deliberate. You want to look at because everything in the past that I've seen so far, including let's call it. I mean, you could say the Great Flood from the Bible, but all cultures have their version of the Great Flood. I think that was some sort of system purge. And that was, again, makes way more sense because I always wondered when I was younger, 40 days and 40 nights of rain, that's going to flood the whole planet? How's that happening? Where's the extra water coming from? And in an enclosed system, though, no, it's just no different than filling up a bathtub. And so, no, I don't think this thing fails at all. I think it's very, very. I think the automated systems have so many redundancies in place, much like what we use in the military. I mean, yeah, we have systems that fail. It's not like when a light bulb burns out or you have a fan belt go off in your car. I think if you have enough redundancies in place, backup systems take over, and as long as it's being maintained, everything works exactly like it's supposed to.
All right. Real quickly, you touched on Admiral Byrd and the hollow earth theory. For listeners that are new to the show, what is hollow earth theory, and how does that either coincide or conflict with your thought on the flat earth theory?
Oh yeah, the hollow earth theory doesn't conflict in my model at all because I used to be a big hollow earth guy because Admiral Byrd was known for the hollow earth theory, that he took his plane in 1926 and he actually flew into an opening in the North Pole and it turned into one of those journey to the center of the earth things where it was lush and tropical and mammoths and dinosaurs and a whole other culture down there. But really, our whole civilization only lives in a very, very narrow band of altitude. From 95% of our population lives from like 0 to 5,000 feet. That's really, really thin in the grand scheme of things. So if you had a subterranean set of caverns or whatever you want down there, anywhere, I mean even 20,000 feet deep, you could you could create some wonderful stuff down there. Way more room than you would need for one civilization. There's probably a whole bunch down there.
Well, doesn't that make more sense then if that truly is what Admiral Byrd found, and we let the other countries come so that we could say, okay, we all share this knowledge now, pull out. There is an ecosystem and an entire civilization here that maybe we're approaching it in a Star Trekian kind of way, that they have not advanced. They're in the dinosaur phase where we are in the reaching the outer limits of the world phase. We don't need to muck with this. We need to let them be, and we need to let them advance at their own tempo. That would make more sense to me of worrying about messing up the Christianity angle, because then you would really upset the apple cart if there's life within life.
That's not bad. Not bad at all. I'll take it. I'll flip it and go even. I'll go the other way, which is maybe they're not primitive. Maybe they're just so advanced they don't want to be bothered with, and maybe it's them that has the prime directive over us.
So then, couldn't that be the hollow earth theory? Actually, is more believable than the flat earth theory, that there is no lip that we're hiding. It's more the fact that we're hiding a system and an ecosystem that's fragile and needs to live on its own without us screwing it up.
Maybe, but there's too many missing things when it comes to space. That there's too many. Again, the fact that they want. Now I know you can say that. Well, even in hollow Earth theory, you wouldn't want to take pictures of the Earth. But if it was truly a sphere and a hollow Earth, you could cover that up way easier than just avoiding all pictures of the Earth from space. They're hiding. When it comes to and I got to pick on NASA. the space organizations of the world, though, have been hiding something for a long time, and everything that I've seen points to the shape of what we really are.
And we'll discuss that when we return. Why? Why would they hide that? Other truthers believe that we're hiding alien craft that were in the sky while we were there, and pictures were altered and manipulated for that reason alone. Could there be a myriad of these things going on? We'll continue with Mark Sargent and the Flat Earth Theory when we return. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. We're back. We're into it. And I promise, folks, don't worry. I'll be pulling the cage off of the Timmanian devil here in a few minutes and let him go with Mark into their tangent of yes and no's. Although, Tim, are you surprised that I've taken a little bit more of a hard-edged approach and not just bought into this thing yet?
No.
No? All right, good. Thank you. Give me a little bit more credit for asking questions here. We're talking with Mark Sargent this evening, and he's done a full series of videos titled Flat Earth Clues, which delve into the possibility of our human civilization actually being like inside a Truman Show. For those of you that don't know that reference, it's a Jim Carrey movie, and I don't blame you for not knowing it, but it's an enclosed system. Maybe one that's been hidden from the public, he's saying, since 1956. I know people are going to be curious, why 1956? Why are you bringing that up as the point of them hiding? I mean, it seems like if they've known this, they've known it for a lot longer than the 1950s.
Well, yeah, they knew it. Let's put it this way. If you had the maps of the old world, yeah, you had them, and they probably knew, but you couldn't prove it until the 1950s. And by that I mean, so after Operation Deep Freeze in 1955 and 1956, it appeared the United States and the Russians made a joint effort to figure out, so they found the outer edge of this thing, and then they had to figure out what the actual size and scope of the structure was. So at that point, they both committed huge amounts of resources to a rocket program and the fabled space race, which wasn't really for that purpose at all. It was just to figure out where we were. So that started in 1957, and by 1958, they were putting atomic weapons on the top of rockets, and they were shooting them up basically straight up for 4 years, from 1958 until 1962. And this isn't secret information. You can look this up on Wiki. Just look up high-altitude nuclear testing, where both the United States and the Russians were sending up these huge packages, the only countries that could do this, and they were firing weapons straight up at the sky. What were they shooting at? And in fact, the United States wasn't even that. They weren't even trying to hide it. One of the packages that they were using, it was called Operation Fishbowl. Why do you name a high altitude package Operation Fishbowl? And once they stopped in 1962.
But just out of curiosity, if that's the case, why do you believe they were setting up the bombs?
Oh, because there's the only way, unfortunately, because our technology was so limited, it was the only way you could actually physically measure what this structure was. You're basically painting the target, painting the sky. So you set up these huge blasts.
We've had echolocation. Why couldn't we use a form of echolocation? That seems like a lot less dangerous, especially if we believe we're under a dome. What's the idea of blowing off 100 billion megatons of nuclear waste into our sky?
Well, we weren't exactly the smartest group in the world, and actually some people have said, well, what if the upper part, what if it was a weird vacuum into space, or what if there was water over this structure?
Right.
Couldn't we have destroyed the whole thing? I was going, okay, well, during the first Trinity test, there were several physicists that said, well, there's a chance that the math we're working out says we might ignite the atmosphere and take out the whole world. And the argument was, well, if it happens, who's going to yell at us? So I think that was the same logic, Plus, it's such a guy thing, isn't it? It's like, well, we're in a structure. Let's see if we can punch a hole through it. So it served two purposes. One, they wanted to see if they could actually get through it, and two, they wanted to see how big it was. So they just kept firing. You can look at the altitude charts of all these packages that were sent up. It was varying everywhere from like 50 kilometers to, I think the highest one officially was like 400 kilometers. But at the same time, all these weird moves were happening. So The first shots were in 1958, and after like the third shot, immediately NASA was formed. And those were after the big megaton hits that they fired up there. And these weren't cheap to make in the 1950s. You know, this took a lot of doing. And NASA was formed, and that, of course, screamed out to me, it's okay, you're trying to militarize the sky because you need to control the sky at that point. You need to make sure that private corporations, everybody has to go through you that's going up there. And then plus the 1959 thing, which was fantastic, which was 1959, they announced the Van Allen radiation belts. And then the very same year, the Antarctic Treaty is put into place. And it couldn't have been more telling to me. It's like, okay, so in the same year, you tell everybody that they're not supposed to go up very high or they'll die from radiation poisoning, and you quietly lock off in Antarctica for all time. So you get the outer edge and the upper edge at the same time, you know, in the same year. A coincidence? No, not a chance. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were huge, massive, broad strokes they were throwing on people. And
all right, Tim, you've got a quick question.
Well, yeah, Mark. Here's the deal. I want to know why, in your opinion, would we regress in the 1980s then when Ronald Reagan came out and said we need a Star Wars system, a missile defense system to defend ourselves against the USSR? Because if there's a limited space or a limited dome, aren't we all blowing each other up then?
That's a good point. Which is, and I'm going to try to be as clear as I can for the listeners here. I'm not saying that NASA faked something. I'm saying every space program you've ever heard of, including the Star Wars system, was absolutely fabricated to do one thing and one thing only, and that is reinforce the globe model, which is control space. When it comes to the Star Wars program, the Russians. And I know it's going to sound horrible to some people because there's some people that still believe, you know, better dead than red. But the Russians have never, ever been our enemies. The Cold War didn't exist because they were in on it since the beginning, since the 50s. Once they figured out that the world looked like what, you know, the Americans and the Soviet Union figured out what the world looked like, they were in on it. So everything that was either a money thing. The Star Wars, great way to pump money into the system. No different than NASA, which I think has spent, in adjusted dollars, over $1 trillion at this point. In fact, they just approved, $20 billion last year, even though they canceled the Mars program. Oh, I'm sorry. They postponed it to 2023. They're shutting down the ISS. The moon mission, again, they say we're going to the moon. Really, give me a launch date. It's a huge money sink. 1958 up until now, every dime that is put into every space program has been wasted.
What is the azimuthal or AE map?
Oh, yeah, the azimuthal equidistant map. That is, if you guys want to see what a visual representation, I know I probably didn't do it that much justice when I was saying what the world looked like. You can look this up. It's AZIMUTHAL equidistant map, and it's in the list of wiki map projections. And I found that kind of on accident, where out of all the projections in there, there's a whole bunch. This one was used by 3 different groups. And I thought it was interesting. First one was it's actually used in the catalog on the USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey, map makers of the world. Second, it's used as the UN flag. So if you really want to know what the flat Earth kind of looks like, I know it's probably not going to be completely accurate because you're hiding in plain sight. It's probably a few variations, but the UN flag shows the flat Earth map from the top down with the North Pole in the center. But something missing on the UN flag, and that is there's no Antarctica on the UN flag. Big continent is bigger than Australia apparently, but you don't have it on that map. Why not? And instead, you have this weird spiky wreath that goes around almost the entire edge, and they don't address it. And anything.
Well, could they address it because it's United Nations, and if nobody owns Antarctica and there's no population there, there's no reason to consider that as part of the United Nations?
Hey, that's a great point. I'll counter that with, yeah, that's not bad. Why doesn't anybody own Antarctica? Do you know any piece of real estate anywhere in the world that's not owned by anyone? We conquer stuff just to conquer it, and nobody's even fought over it. There's never even been a dispute. You'd think that Russia and China or somebody would be like, no, we need to fight over Antarctica. At the very least, when oil started creeping up, I know it's now below a certain number per barrel, but for decades,
that's because we're leading into another election year. As soon as the election years are over, gas is going to fly right back through the roof. Conspiracy theory proven. Right, and anyway. It could be that, right? And what's funny is you say who doesn't own something. Yeah, I mean, there's even people selling stars and selling property on the moon. Our good friend Mally Fox from our show owns a parcel of the moon. So, yeah, you're right. Somebody will sell something at all times. Somebody's going to want ownership. So it is intriguing. I'm more fascinated by, I wonder what is really there if there's this hollow earth theory. And we found, there was an article just this last year or two, Tim, remember we were talking about where they found this huge cavern system that has its own atmosphere and light and rainstorms and inside a cavern system.
Oh, yeah.
So why wouldn't it?
And to that effect, most people, unless they watch the clues, it's very, very possible because at certain depths, I mean, and that's just the caverns we can find. You got to remember the deepest hole that we've ever drilled as a civilization is only 8 miles or 12 kilometers Canadian. But that's 8 miles. That's not very far at all. And that's the joke I'm throwing back at science because it's supposedly 4,000 miles to the center of the Earth, and yet we see all these pictures. We've all seen them when growing up. Oh, here's the cross section of the Earth. There's the red band, the orange band, the yellow band, the white band. That's all these different layers. And it's like, how do you know this exactly? You've only drilled down 8 miles. That's nothing. That's a fraction of 1%. And you're telling us, and it's because science does not like to leave question marks. And so instead of showing us a globe with a big question mark in the center for all the kids to read, they show us what they say. We just take it for granted, even though they'll disclaim it. They say, well, we're extrapolating. We're kind of filling in some blanks here. Like, you're filling the whole thing. It's not some blanks. If
our planet is really not spinning and doing everything we're told to, and it's some kind of giant geomagnetic principle, some kind of machine running our planet, isn't there an inherent danger with using EMPs then?
Potentially. Sure. I mean, that's just it. They don't. I'm sure the powers that be don't know all the automated systems that are in place here, but yet they still doesn't stop them from messing with it. I think part of this could even be a jailbreak scenario, and it has been since the 1950s. For example, let's say they realize right off the bat if megaton weapons weren't going to do it. It's like, okay, maybe we're going about this the wrong way. What other technology can we use? Oh, how about that HARP thing? Yeah, frequency might be able to disrupt it, do something there.
So you think we're trying to figure out how to get off this rock once and for all?
I do think that.
It might be interesting then if we look at that. Okay, we know that when a rocket goes up, as it hits a certain level, it needs a booster, which then fires off and explodes a whole new chain of reactions, right, to continue its journey. Could it be that in an attempt to get beyond that these weren't just megaton nuclear weapons charges, these were larger rocket packs for something that we were trying to send beyond the atmosphere, as the booster pack to get up and beyond.
Maybe
we might be the bottled planet of Candor here, right? I mean, we've got this we've got this utility that we're trying to get through, and maybe that's what they found. Maybe there is it'd be interesting to see where they did the testing in what we call the atmosphere. Is there a certain apex where if we look at where America shot it up, would it have aligned with where Russia was shooting up? Were we aiming for a certain hole?
Excellent point. Yeah, that's a good one to look into. Yeah.
Let's go keep with this. All right. First of all, the other problem that I have overall with this is we have whistleblowers about Area 51. We have whistleblowers about the Roswell incident. We have whistleblowers that have talked about Bigfoot. They found documents in government files about that and about our place in the universe. If all of these people were involved, why are there not more deathbed confessions? Where are the whistleblowers in this giant contingent? People can't shut the hell up.
You're absolutely right. With something like this, though, because it's so because it's so physically big, it's going to sound weird, but you don't need that many people because it's so well hidden and it's been so well hidden for so long. You don't need that many people in the know. As a matter of fact,
no, you just need one Edward Snowden, one guy who's had enough of the BS and digs in too deep and releases this information. So here's the point: there's got to be more than one Edward Snowden in every one of these organizations that got a chance to visit Antarctica and would know the truth. Why has somebody not finally pulled that grenade on their way out the door knowing they're about to die and made a major announcement that we could laugh off in the news because this guy's a wackadoo and he was obviously hopped up on drugs as he was dying? But why has that great resolve or reveal not happened yet?
Well, I don't want to necessarily go to a dark place here, but
Too
in the
late.
secret of this. All right.
Bring it on. That's Darkness
that's
Radio,
right.
son.
I'm sorry. That's what the show is called.
That's right.
And that is for something like this because it is so big and so important. I mean, this isn't like your normal conspiracies where you can just hide it in the desert and bury it forever and ever. This is something to where you would monitor anybody that was even remotely, close, and you'd psychological profile anyone. And the first time you saw an email or a normal email or a phone call that got a little astray, you'd watch that person and then you'd take steps. And I don't want to say that we just start killing everybody that even thought about going down that road and whistleblowing on this. But would you have any choice if you were trying to protect this?
Okay, well, I get that you're going to test these people. You're going to have a good psychological understanding of these people. But this is 1954, 56, when maybe we don't have as good a grasp on psychology as we do today. Then we put up astronauts into outer space in these shots. If we're in control of these people, why are they going up and admitting that they're seeing UFOs? If it's all bunk, why would they even put that little nugget out there? Because that just seems like a strange, or is that it? Is that the MacGuffin?
No. That actually helps. Those stories, that I will say, I've criticized some of the operations in the past because I think they're lazy or they're not well done. But when it comes to this, they've done some very, very clever things. And of course, you're going to hire the best people with some really high IQs. And that is everything when it came to space has been to keep you, every story, regardless whether you believe it or not, reinforces the globe model. For example, Face on Mars. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter because it keeps the foundation of it is always the same, and that is face on Mars, you're thinking about it, you're in a globe. Hexagon on Saturn, you're thinking about globe. Hey, look, this is a new thing we just did on Pluto, globe. Mars, it just goes back and forth, and that is especially with UFOs. And yeah, the Apollo astronauts, because people say, well, did all the astronauts know? It's like, well, the Apollo astronauts knew, but that's just because it was, the first time they had to deal with this, and they were kind of testing out what was gonna happen. And these guys psychologically were devastated. They were train wrecks. You guys probably saw some of the press conferences. These guys did not know what to do with this because it's one thing to fake it, to fake doing any sort of space program, but it's a whole other thing when you know why. And that is, okay, apparently there is a creator and the world isn't what we thought it is. I mean, that weighs on you after a while. The new astronauts know you don't have to tell them anything. They're just Air Force employees. You make them sign non-disclosure agreements, and you say, okay, look, you're going to fake the interior of the ISS. You're going to go around in your khakis and your polo shirts and not care about anything, apparently, and never wear a spacesuit. But you can't ask why. Now, you can speculate all you want, but you don't have the clearance to ask why you're faking it. So their conscience is
you
clear.
think that they're doing it as a form of disinformation by talking about aliens? It keeps us focused on the idea that there's something beyond our globe, that there's something out there, and that's where the exploration should be, and not what is our planet? What are we?
Oh yeah, because it's everything terrestrial, everything ground based. Look, nobody owns their private rockets, and we should all have Jetsons cars by now. I mean, good Lord, they were selling Pan Am flights to the moon years ago.
Right.
But if you tell somebody that, oh yeah, by the way, if you dig deep enough, you might be able to find another civilization. Excavation companies all of a sudden become very, very important, because you're not going to stop people. Because the average person on the street, it's like, wow, I'm going to go to the Arctic Circle. I'm going to go to Antarctica. You've got to keep the population in check, and so the easiest way is just to say, well, there's nothing there. There never was anything in there, and it's cold and horrible, and you don't ever need to go there. So
you believe that the space program was set up to do one thing? And one thing only. That was to get a photograph of Earth to show that it was round.
Well, not just, yeah. In fact, I'll give Matt Boylan credit for this one because he said it actually better than I did, which was eventually you have to take a picture of the Earth because you can put all the globes in the classroom all you want, but eventually you've got to have a photograph of it because people are going to say, okay, where's the photograph? The problem is you can't just hand people a photograph. Because the first question is, well, how'd you take it? So you've got to create a rocket program to at least simulate the fact that you can get up high enough to take that picture so at least people believe the photograph. And that's when, that's one that's so unbelievably telling. And that was, and look this up, this is again, not secret information. They had one photo of the Earth from 1972. It was the Apollo 17 mission. Of course, why from Apollo 8 through Apollo 17 they never took a picture? They literally totally took it on the last mission coming home, and then there was no Apollo 18.
All right, hold tight, Mark, because Tim's head is spinning off his shoulders right now.
Nope. There's more than one picture. There's a picture from the International Space Station, which shows not the landing gear, but the bottom of the space station with a picture of the Earth in the background, showing the curvature of the Earth. How do you explain that? And it's in perspective.
No, I got you. No, everything. All right, let me back up. When I say the picture from the Earth, from space, I mean a whole picture of the Earth in full sunlight. Showing what we all know. If you want to see the picture of the whole Earth, we all know the shot from 1972, which is the bottom part of Africa and supposedly the entire Antarctic continent. Why they chose those two out of everything else, I have no idea. But what you're saying,
But Mark, let me stop you one more time here. If you can't get a picture of the entire globe, because in the globe system or in the globe theory, half the Earth is going to be dark because it's not facing the sun. You're only going to get a picture of half the Earth.
Right, but like the moon, when it's got the sunlight on it, you're going to see the exposed face. That's what they were looking to get a picture of.
Yeah, and that's what they got.
One shot in 43 years with thousands of satellites, including the Hubble telescope and the moon, and nobody's ever taken a shot in 43 years. In fact, they went out of their way. Here's why we know that this whole movement is actually working, because they actually released the second shot last year in the middle of the summer, July of 2015, where they said, oh, yeah, by the way, here's the second blue marble shot we've taken in 43 years. The White House retweeted it. And I'm going, you guys are actually fessing up to this? But to your first question, anything that you see, and I'm trying to make this as encompassing as I can here, anything you see in any space program when it comes to shots of the Earth is fake. There's nothing, the curvature of the Earth, everything in the ISS is fake. If you doubt that, just go on YouTube and look up ISS hoax and watch the several hours of internal ISS footage and tell me everything that they're doing in there is real. Or I'll give you another one, and that is find me. And
well, it's interesting, too, if I can mention, Tim, Kubrick, the big supposed report from Kubrick that was released this year, the audio, where he talks about faking something, and it was a major shoot for this. I mean, that would fall right into line with this, the Truthers series, that we never made it to the moon. We never made it up that way, and we had to convey this message as though we had to fool everybody, and this would be the why. Would have to
this was. Thank you, by the way, for mentioning that, because this was something that bugged me for years. Which was, I didn't believe in the moon stuff. I hadn't for the longest time, but I couldn't figure out why. Why would you fake the moon mission? Just to put an American flag up there and wave it around, rah rah. Doesn't make sense. It's not good enough. And then when I saw this, it made so much more sense. It's like, okay, you didn't want to fake the moon mission. You had to fake it. Because if you don't fake the moon mission, eventually somebody in the private sector, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, McDonnell Douglas, somebody in combination with, I don't know, any other company, probably an oil company, is going to want to they're going to want to do something corporate and take advantage of the moon. So you go to the moon. You go a whole bunch of times, and then you say, oh, it's boring. Nobody should ever go up there again. And that's it. And then nobody goes. I could go on this forever. But the other thing was, why did everybody else quit? The Russians, after we got there, it's like, oh, we put a man on the moon. The Russians just pack it in.
Oh, damn Americans screwed up the moon already. No need to go.
That's a good accent. That's right. It's like, don't need to go. Nope. Just put it in boxes. It's like, are you kidding me?
All right, Tim.
But Mark,
been a cold war on the moon.
You've already brought up privatization a few times. You have SpaceX, you have Virgin America, or rather Virgin Atlantic America / America, that are already saying we're going to go to the moon. The U.S. government has farmed out, for lack of a better term, their space program to SpaceX. So what's to stop them from finding out that it's all fake? They want to take passengers, normal people who can pay the fee, to the moon. If the moon landing was fake, where are they going to land?
Well, the one thing, Tim, let me come in on this, Mark, and just see what your thoughts are. And I don't mean to pull it out, but they're already having problems. Could it be that we're going to see a Challenger explosion?
And we already have seen a rocket explosion.
Right, but I'm talking about privatized. You're going to see a shipload of Nicolas Cage and Anne Margaret and whoever else wants to go up explode, and then you know what? We can't do this. We can't keep it in the private sector, and boom, that shuts it down because that's all it's going to take is one massive tragedy.
That would be an excellent way of doing it. And
then that would keep the government, though, Tim, don't you think?
No,
that would keep the government. Well, you don't know the question, so hold on. That would keep the government into why would the government turn it over? Why would they allow this? Because if they seem like they have no skin in the game, then yeah, go ahead, privatize it. You guys should totally do this. And then they let that happen. It seems like they're not hiding anything. Again, they're hiding in plain sight. And again, I'm not totally buying into this theory, but I can see, following enough conspiracy theories, why sometimes you're going to give them the option, go ahead, do that for yourself. And then you'll kill it at the last minute. There'll be something wrong. There'll be an explosion that'll put enough doubt into people's mind that I don't want to put my hands in Richard Branson's, or my life in his hands.
Why didn't the government stop when Challenger exploded?
Stop the space program?
Yeah.
It's not about stopping it. It's about slowing it down. It's about delay. Everything is about keeping this thing going as long as you can. They knew stopping it would raise too many eyebrows. So, and eventually, what you just said there, the Challenger was a perfect, eventually long term. There's no space shuttle program anymore. It's gone
because they privatized it. They privatized it. They gave it to the private sector.
But they're not doing anything. And those private shuttles that are supposedly going up, they're not showing any footage of any docking thing. Like that British guy that just went up there just recently. He supposedly came in on a private little shuttle thing, and they didn't even show the docking procedure. Everything. Where else should I go with this? Orion.
Well, hold on. We have to take a break. We'll take a break. We'll come back and continue on this, the Flat Earth Theory, with Mark Sargent, our guest here on Darkness Radio. All right, we're back. I want to get right into this again as we're talking about the Flat Earth Theory. Our guest this evening, Mark Sargent. We have a link up to his website and his research. You can check it out at darknessradio.com. Click on the guest tab. Tim, I know you have so many more questions, and I'm sorry to keep jumping in, too. I'm just fascinated by this, but I love the idea of conspiracies, and I can tell you, Tim, when I'm answering, what it is the 2,000 emails we're going to get from people all over going, because the government's going to keep screwing us. They're going to hide it. Of course they're going to. So I'm just trying to be that voice of most of the listeners who are going to jump onto the conspiracy bandwagon with this.
I'll throw out, because there was one point I didn't get out, and
sure.
I'm going to get it out now.
Okay.
The reason it was privatized is because we couldn't afford to run NASA. And that's why it was given to the private sector. If it was given to the private sector, there's obviously nothing to hide, because what would you tell everybody? Will just continue faking it? That there's no destination for you to go to? That you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in research on nothing?
Yeah, pretty much. It's how long you can keep the story going. And that, again, this was not going to be a permanent solution. They knew this. The contingency plan has always been, eventually you're going to have to reveal this in one way or the other. And that is, you spend the money that you got for NASA, and then the question is what you were talking about early, Dave, which is, do you fess up and try to turn this into something positive, or do you turn it the other way and do like a fake alien invasion, a stage this, a stage that, or, where someone, because lots of people have been telling me it's like it feels like the whole Flat Earth thing is part of something else, something bigger, if there is something bigger than Flat Earth. And that is, do you then follow that with all of a sudden a spaceship shows up, whoever's spaceship we're not going to say, and they say, oh, yeah, by the way, we're the ones that built it. And then all of a sudden, bingo, there you go, New World Order, right in a can. Piece of cake. But to your point, why the privatizing the space stuff, it's just delaying. I mean, look at the failures that Virgin Galactic and SpaceX have. Since this thing has started, it almost feels like NASA is winding down on purpose so they minimize the damage to themselves when this thing happens. The space shuttle program being shut down, the Orion project being kicked down the road for when's the first human supposed to go out? 2023 now? That's a bunch of crap.
But Tim, I'm just curious too what your thoughts are on the fact that if we ran out of money to run the space shuttle program and to run NASA and space exploration, and then turning it over to privatization so they can do it, wouldn't that be a more affordable way for the government to still be involved? They'll share their information, they'll share the wisdom, do this. They don't have to put forth the money.
But part of giving it,
or they put forth a smaller version of it to these independence because nobody's going to expect Virgin Galactic and SpaceX to have the same kind of capabilities.
They don't put out any money because if they put out
that
money,
we know of.
If they put out money, it's according to this theory, you're just throwing it away. In privatization, when you privatize anything, and to address the failures, Mark, Ford had to fail when he was making the automobile. You had to fail at some point when you're making the light bulb. There's always failure before you find success. Now, in privatization, you turn over some technology, and there's some known technology, obviously rocket technology and whatever, but there's some things that privatization and guys like Elon Musk are going to take a look at it and say, you know what, we're going to make a better rocket than what you've made, but in order to do so, we have to fail a couple of times to figure out how we're going to do it. They have the model to make a successful rocket. That's not the problem. The problem is, how do we improve on it? How do we get better fuel efficiency out of it? How do we make it more durable for space? How do we expand our oxygen supply? Different scientific things that are going to cause them to fail, that they have to put money into research and development.
Which prolongs it further. And it would make more sense for the government to privatize and seem to allow the people to do it on the lower scale, and they'll expect a longer time to get to that level, which buys, in the theory here, in the conspiracy theory, buys them more time to screw around
You're
with this.
talking about privatization that's only been in play for less than 10 years. So you're saying the automobile was made in 10 years? No. It wasn't even improved on in 10 years. It took
No, but you're dismissing the whole idea of conspiracy.
Let me cut to the chase here, if I might. And this is something anybody can look up because I don't want to miss it because I know we're going to run out of time. And that is the Orion project. And anyone can look this up. Was postponed. It was delayed almost indefinitely. It was kicked down from 2016 down to 2021 for the first unmanned flight. But if anyone wants to go up and look online, all you have to do is type in the search engine Orion Trial by Fire. It's a video produced by NASA. It's on the NASA website where they're talking about the Mars mission. That's the Orion mission. And they're talking about very detailed about the Van Allen radiation belts. And they say in this clip, and I have no idea why this video was ever made, they're saying, look, we're going to have to we've got to figure out how to solve the Van Allen radiation belt problem before we send people through this region of space. How is that even possible if that video was made in October of 2014? Why has that video been made? Because the Van Allen problem should have been solved. Apparently, we had already solved it in the 1960s. Or did we forget what happened after that? Why are they even talking about that? What they're doing is they seem to be setting themselves up to fail. It's almost like they want to get caught, which is really weird. But, maybe that's part of it.
But would you send yourself into radiation without a way to block it? I mean, that's...
But the Van Allen belt is between us and the moon, too, isn't it?
What shielding did they use? Remember, the Van Allen belts, they're between us and the moon. And we supposedly went, 8, not 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17 round trips through those belts. Nobody died. Nobody got cancer. The capsules weren't contaminated. And yet the Orion project is now saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we got to solve that radiation problem of those belts. It's very, very specific. Look this up when you get a chance. Because the conspiracy world is, especially the flat Earth people, are going crazy.
Right, but Mark, couldn't it be? We know that. Okay, you can go visit Chernobyl right now.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that it's heavily radiated. There's no doubt at all that is failing. You can go in and you can wear a uniform that has a little gauge on it. When that gauge gets to a certain level, you got to get the hell out. Is the expanse between here and the moon and the exposure to the Van Allen radiation belt much less dangerous than the prolonged exposure it's going to take to get to Mars? And could that be what the concern is?
Well, that's just it. As far as they didn't offer any additional information for that, but they never ever said there was a thing that just killed me, and that was they never said what the shielding was, and that was there's only two common elements that. There's only two common elements that you can use right now that we can block radiation with. One is lead, very cheap, and one is gold, which is very expensive, but also twice as dense. And that was it's like, what shielding did you use on the moon missions? They never will say what shielding they used. To this date, even Van Allen says, well, we just went real fast through it. That's what we did. We just floored it, just hit the gas and just went through it. I was going, that's great, but that only works one way, even if you believe that, because when you're coming back home, you got to slow way, way down so you can get to the atmosphere and land. And sorry, I go off on a rant when it comes to the whole.
No problem. Go ahead, Tim. I know you have some more questions you want to fit in.
Well, as you say that, no astronauts ever died of cancer or whatever. I'm looking it up, and there's a article on Wiki talking about spaceflight radiation carcinogenesis. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Astronauts are exposed to approximately 50 to 2,000 millisieverts while on a 6-month duration just to the International Space Station alone, the moon and beyond, according to this article. Okay? The risk of cancer caused by ionizing radiation is well documented at radiation doses beginning at 50 millisieverts and above. So, yes, there is exposure to radiation, no matter what shielding they're using right now. And obviously, and it says here, it asks for the composition of space radiation. So space radiation is composed mostly of high-energy protons, helium nuclei, and HZZ ions. The ionization patterns in molecules, cells, tissues, and the resulting biological insults are distinct from typical terrestrial radiation, X-rays and gamma rays, which are low LET radiation, GCRs, which are galactic cosmic rays from outside the Milky Way galaxy, consisting mostly of high-energetic protons with a small component of HZZ ions. So prominent HZZ has carbon, oxygen, magnesium, silicon, iron. Nothing you would think would harm you. However, they may still be analyzing these particular cosmic rays and saying, you know what, it may or may not be dangerous, but we need to find a new way to block this radiation that we didn't have before. Maybe there are medical tests out there that show that these astronauts have been damaged, but not released to the public.
Not bad. Not bad. I'll give you that. It's one of the better answers I've heard over the last year. That's not bad at all. But at the same time, they still won't say what the shield. As far as I know, there's only 2 things you can. Here's the big problem, and that is the 2 elements, which from a design standpoint, there's only 2 elements you can use to shield, and that is because they have to be dense. It's the same reason why when you go to the dentist, as far as I know, they still put those lead blankets on you, to protect you from, the very limited amount of radiation. And that is, it's really heavy. And the last thing you want to do is put on the top of any rocket a big anchor. So I think they really shot themselves in the foot in 1959 when they announced the Van Allen radiation belts, because 10 years later they were saying, we got to figure out how to get through this, and then they knew a lot more about radiation in that 10-year span, and then they figured, you know what, we're just going to go through it, we're not going to talk about it, and maybe no one will notice. And then the internet came on, and that messed up everybody. All
right, we have to take our final break. We'll be back with more Mark Sargent right after this. Wrapping up another edition of Darkness Radio here. Fascinating show tonight. Love talking about different theories and conspiracies, beliefs. I mean, you certainly piqued my interest, Mark. This is something that I'll definitely have an intriguing bit more research to look into, and I encourage our listeners. Like you said, it sounds so out there, but sometimes it's breaking through the paradigms of our current belief systems where we make the biggest aha moments, when we have the next evolution, and it's reaching and learning. And in this case, it almost seems like we're reaching back in time instead of progressing. So kind of fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about this. All right, if we're this encapsulated chunk of ecosystem, where does the moon and the sun factor into a system like this?
The moon and the sun are interesting because it's not like normally when I talk about this, because I say how I envision this, and if you've ever been to a planetarium, and I know there's not that many of them around, but if you've ever been to a planetarium, that's really what it looks like. You go inside, it's got kind of a dome structure, and then they project the stars over this ceiling, and it looks like a star system. If you walk somebody blindfold in there, they might be disoriented for a while. But the sun and the moon are very, very different, and that is from planetarium. That is, they appear to be solid objects that are spinning around the top of this thing like a needle over a record player, and then they shift their orbits depending on the seasons. And that is very interesting because there are certain things, because if that's the case, then the sun and the moon, they've got to be completely artificial, right? Because how would a blood moon happen if there's no Earth between the sun and the moon? And it's like, well, it's artificial. And people say, well, no, it can't be. It's like the moon is its own display system. And I go, no. Things came out last year which I didn't even think, and I opened with Flat Earth, and I thought it was really weird because somebody was saying that it's like, hey, did you notice, by the way, and maybe it's only, because of our advanced technology now that we can detect this, did you know that the moonlight is cold? I go, yeah, everybody knows it's colder at night. They go, no. it's actually generating some sort of refrigerated radiation. I was going, that's not even possible. The only way we can do that is with like a cold laser. And they go, yeah, watch this. And I've seen a whole bunch of tests on this, and I've even helped out with some of this stuff, which is everybody knows that if you're in the sunlight on a hot day, it's like 100 degrees in the sun and 90 degrees in the shade. We all know that because the shade or whatever object it is blocks some of the sun's radiation, so it's cooler in the shade. But when you're in the moonlight, it's just something very, very interesting, and that is if it's like, say, 50 degrees in the moonlight, it's actually 60 degrees in the moon shade. It's warmer. And that isn't possible. That cannot happen if it is reflecting the sun's rays. I mean, if the moon is what we think it is, and it's reflecting some of the sun's rays down to you, yeah, you might get only a fraction of that, but it's not going to get colder, not a whole bunch colder. In some cases, 12 and a half degrees colder in the moonlight than in the moon shade. And so I even proposed during one of my shows, I go, you really want to do some weird stuff and bend your mind on this? I go, take a magnifying glass, because, in a magnifying glass in the sun, you can burn ants or start fires and all that stuff. But if you take a magnifying glass to moonlight, what happens? Does it get even colder, or does it warm up? And it actually gets a few degrees even colder than that. And that is such a mind bender for me, because at that point, everything starts to break down. Because, okay, the moon is generating its own light, which means what? That means it's not reflecting the sun's light, which means what did we land on? Because if the moon is self-illuminated, what's that gray, dull gray landscape that we land on that certainly wasn't glowing when all those movies and pictures were taken? That means we didn't land on anything, and the whole thing starts to collapse from there.
What about meteorites, which we've seen enter our atmosphere and crash to Earth?
No, that's easy. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's easy because and a great little reinforcement tool, because the creators, that's definitely not us. We're human beings. Our civilization has nothing to do with the structure that we live in now. So for meteorites, all you have to do is introduce a piece of metal or high speed, shallow angle, let the atmosphere burn it up, and try not to aim for any major cities, which is why that thing in Russia got a little dicey, I think. Whoever was doing that day was asleep at the switch. But basically, whoever built the structure, they're involved in the meteorites.
Who did this? Who do you believe is behind this encapsulation of our world, then? You keep saying the creators. Do you have any insight?
Well, I mean,
are we aliens in a big petri dish that are being experimented on?
Well, it's very possible. I mean, it depends how spiritual you are, I suppose. I mean, because if you're a big believer in God, if you follow any particular religion, that's the first thing you're going to think, that intelligent design means it's a divine power. Other people who are not as spiritual are going to think advanced civilization, which leads you to the question, did God build it directly, or did God subcontract it out? And if it is built by an advanced civilization, then you're kind of blurring the lines between what we consider to be just an advanced race or a divine or a divine power. So it could go either way. I tend to lean, because the design seems so efficient on so many levels and perfect in many ways. I mean, the world is a horrible, tortured place, but it appears to be that even though the environment is perfect, all the damage is done by us. I'll lean towards the divine. Yeah, sure. I'll go with the majority on this one.
All right. What experiments can we do? And we've got about 3.5 minutes left. Are there any experiments we can actually do to prove this?
Okay, two quick ones. The first one is except the moonlight test. If you get a chance, go out with a digital thermometer in the moonlight. You can even use a half moon if you want. You'll still see it. And that is a point-and-click thermometer. Test the moonlight, and then test the moon shade, and tell me what you think. That's a really good one to start you off. But as far as going after the shape of this thing, if you're rich, the easiest way would be to take, if you could do it, take two ships down near the Antarctic. One goes clockwise, the other goes counterclockwise, and see how long it takes them to meet up. It should not take that long, maybe I think as little as a week, or you take one boat and one plane. That's if you're rich. If you're not rich, you're going to have to go after the curvature. And the curvature is a really interesting one, because the curvature should be 8 inches per mile squared, which is 8 inches times every mile times itself. So the first mile is 8 inches. The second mile is 2 times 2 is 4, times 8 is 32. The third one is 3 times 3 is 9, is times 8 is 72. But we've seen no indication of curvature anywhere. And by that I mean I've got a lot of people that I've interviewed from all branches of the military, flight instructors, career surveyors. I've got a missile guy from the United States Navy who's still in now that shot ship to ship 2-inch beam radar at 60 miles. At 60 miles, that should be thousands of feet below the curvature or on the other side of the hill, as it were. And he's painting targets all day long. That should not be possible if the Earth has a curvature in it. Go after the curvature if you get a chance. Look up online. Look up all you have to do is go to YouTube, type in flat Earth. You'll see a whole bunch of experiments. They're all there. People are working on them every week, and it's
right.
It's
and Tim, you were talking about Neil Tyson or deGrasse Tyson had kind of addressed this as well. What was his answer for this? Do you know?
It's long and complicated, but
well, no. I can give you the summary, and that is the side to side, left to right curvature. You should not be able to see it. No person can be able to see it left to right, bending on the sides, because you're never going to be able to get high enough. Even weather balloons, you'd have to get up hundreds of miles before you even saw the curvature. That's why when I'm talking about the curvature, I'm talking forward and back, what you can see over the horizon. If you think a ship's going over the edge of the horizon, it is not. It's perspective. We got 3D models that can show you that all day long.
Okay, now expound on that for a second with the ship, because most scientists will say take binoculars, watch a ship, and it will disappear from bottom to top, meaning that it was going over a curve in the Earth, and that you can't follow it with your or even with a naked eye or binoculars, because obviously it's curving, and you can't follow the curve over the other side.
Perfect, absolutely perfect, and that is. When you look at it, it looks like it's going from bottom to top, but it's really just shrinking. It's getting smaller and smaller. It's perspective. And if you think I'm kidding there, you look at, here's the other way, and that we can only do this with high-end cameras now, with zoom, and that is you look at a ship, it disappears over the horizon, right? And it's miles and miles and miles away. When you zoom in with your camera, it should be on the other end of the other side of that curve, and you shouldn't be able to see it anymore because you're looking over the top of a hill. That shouldn't be there anymore, and yet here's the ship again. Once you've zoomed in, it dropped over the horizon. Why can you now see it again? And you could do that over and over with any telescopic lens.
All right.
Now, let me ask you this real quick, and I want your explanation in less than a minute. If planes fly directly over land and go straight, and the Earth is flat, why do planes fly straight and contrails or chemtrails curve in the sky?
I don't know. I've never gotten that question. I'd come back and say, well, if when the plane's flying, why isn't nosing down every couple thousand feet in when it's going forward? Because technically that plane adjusting to the curve either should be nosing down because it's constantly pulling up, or if gravity's pulling down, it should be nosing up all the time. And there are apps and people that have taken with them on their flights overseas